Minister, as you know, on the 27th of March, this House gave extraordinary powers to the Minister for Health to introduce regulations. For almost 2 weeks, people adhered to the medical recommendations without any regulations. They were introduced on the 7th of April. You were reported in the media as being one of those in favour of it. I'm not asking you to comment on that. It would be inappropriate for you to comment on what happens at Cabinet. But my question is, those regulations required people to stay in their home unless they had a reasonable excuse to be out of it. And one of the reasonable excuses was to carry out essential services or to go to an essential retail outlet. Now, that gives a huge amount of power to individual members of An Garda Síochána. And that's a very difficult position to put those individual members into, I dare say. It's a power that I'd certainly not feel comfortable having to determine whether it's reasonable that somebody that I meet should be out of their home or whether it's not. And my first question is, how long do you think that it's feasible to continue with these penal provisions? Because there are penal provisions in the regulation which are quite unusual, but maybe necessary or were necessary at a certain time. How long do you think it's feasible? The next question is, as a matter of rule of law, people have to know what the law is, and then so that they can organise their behaviour and regulate their behaviour in accordance with the law. Now, the law very clearly said that hardware stores could open. And I heard numerous ministers, the highest government officials in the land, ministers, say that hardware stores will be allowed to open from such and such a date, when the law stated that hardware stores were allowed to open. Now, that to me begs questions about rule of law. If we don't know what the law is, how can we adhere to it? If ministers are saying hardware stores can open from a certain date, and the law is saying that they're allowed to open as we speak, then that creates confusion, and confusion about what is lawful and what is not can never be good in a democracy, Minister. Broadcasters are saying you must stay in your home, or you may now leave your home, with regard to people over 70, when there was nothing whatsoever in the law. There were medical recommendations, and I encourage everybody to adhere to the medical recommendations that the Chief Medical Officer and NEFIT are putting down. But I would not tell somebody that they must do something, because then people think, if I leave my home, I'm doing something unlawful, when they may have been doing something unwise or unhealthy, but not unlawful. And I think for the sake of rule of law in this democracy, we do need clarity, Minister, and I'd ask if you would agree with me on that, or if you think it's okay to have such confusion about what is and is not lawful. Thank you.
Deputy, these are exceptional powers in emergency circumstances. Having said that, the regulations are clear in that they require people to remain in their residence unless they have a reasonable excuse to leave it. Now, a reasonable excuse, as the Deputy will be aware, includes going to work in an essential service, includes going to the shops, again for essential goods, going to the doctor, taking exercise, in now an area which was 2 kilometres and now 5 kilometres. There's also a strict prohibition on the gathering of persons for any purposes other than a purpose related to reasons for leaving the residence. And yes, of course I acknowledge the serious situation and the extensive powers that have been given under the emergency. And that's why I was very keen to ensure that there was transparency and that there was balance insofar as the reports on a weekly basis from the Garda Commissioner and also the involvement of the policing authority, again publishing reports on a regular basis and engaging with human rights organisations and the Gardaí at all times, being mindful to ensure that it continues to deploy human rights at the core of its operation and its code of ethics. The arrangements are temporary. I'm not in a position to say when exactly they will be lifted, but this will be on the advice of the public health experts which are given to government.